we'll dive into the topic. If we start with your PhD and non-invasive, monitoring to assess how athletes are responding to the training, what does that mean for those that perhaps don't study sports science or aren't strength and conditioning coaches?
So I guess if you sort of define what a submax fitness test is, it's essentially a protocol where the external load is fixed or standardized, and then you're assessing how the athlete's responding internally. So what that looks like is you can assess RPE, lactate, but they're not as pragmatic and probably not as feasible in terms of not interrupting training. And there's where heart rate derived indices come in. So what that looks like is the current protocol we do is a 3-minute run at 13 kilometers an hour. And you sample the last 30 seconds where you'd expect a stable heart rate response. So tracking that over time, what you'd expect is that if you're getting fitter, you'd expect a lower heart rate response.
What was your rationale with 3 minutes and 13 Ks per hour?
There's quite a bit of research on this, on different protocols and different testing formats. Any listeners that are interested in this, go and search up Salil's research. About 3 to 5 minutes is what's typical to elicit a stable heart rate response. And then you also want an intensity that is actually submaximal. So you want a range around 70 to 90% heart rate max. The reason for this is that, you're trying to understand what the athlete's physiological efficiency is or physiological state. The basis for this, for the duration of the test, is mostly around the stability of the heart rate response. But the intensity of the test, it doesn't seem to matter too much. So other than it being submaximal, you can do one at 12 kilometers an hour, you can do that at 13, 14. As long as it's consistent over time, you can sort of pick your poison. There's a researcher by the name of Cavanagh that did a lot of research on Kenyan runners, so the most economical runners in the world. And part of what he saw was that at submaximal speeds, the Kenyan runners compared to highly trained runners would display a lower submaximal heart rate response. But when you expose them to a maximal effort test, like a 10K time trial, they're actually able to reach higher heart rates and sustain those higher heart rates for longer. So there's this idea that the athletes with greater cardiovascular capacity have the ability to be efficient at submaximal speeds or submaximal intensities, but are also able to tolerate higher levels of exertion at maximal effort. And this makes sense, right? Because part of the adaptive responses of both cardiac and skeletal muscle are an improved fatigue tolerance, right, to contractions.
Talk us through, I guess, the practical implications of decisions that this has helped with, maintaining or perhaps developing, some fitness throughout pre-season and in season.
When you're interpreting some of this data, it's pretty key to be confident on what's a meaningful change. So anything inside 1 to 2% points, you'd suggest it's just measurement error. So anything above that, let's say 3% points, you'd say, okay, it's outside the measurement error, so something's happened physiologically. Other than that, you'd look at, okay, so what's a change that we think would relate to something that we give a shit about? So for example, time trial performance, MAS. So Martin Bushai did a big body of work in this space, and they came out with, having studied a lot of different associations between time trial performance and submax heart rate, that around a 5% point change in submax heart rate would associate with 0.5 to 1 kilometer per hour change in MAS. So when you got a change that big, then you can be somewhat confident that actually will translate to running performance.
So what are some other tips around, if you're looking to bring this into your process, that you'd recommend?
Try and make it as invisible as possible. So it's hard because now on social media, I'm talking about submax and some of the players are seeing it, and it's hard not to tell them it's a test. But if in the best case scenario, you can say like, oh, we're just going for a jog around the oval, we're just going to pace it. And they don't even know they're being tested. That's one of the beauties of submax. You can't cheat your heart rate. So if they don't even know they're being tested, even better. Try and be quite clear around the expectation of, not talking, not pushing each other, not bouncing the footy, because all that noise adds up, and you probably want to limit how much it influences your measure, which is eventually going to influence your decision making.